The greasy air of the cantina on Station 734 tasted of stale synthale, unrecycled sweat, and desperation. It was a flavor Jax had grown accustomed to, the universal perfume of the galaxy's forgotten corners. He leaned back, the legs of his chair groaning in protest, and kicked his worn leather boots onto the scarred surface of the sabacc table. A collective grumble rose from the three other players, a hulking four-armed Vaughn, a reptilian Canthar with flickering eyes, and a human washout whose best days were a distant memory, etched in the lines of his face. "Read 'em and weep, gentlemen," Jax said, a lazy, confident grin spreading across his face. He tossed his cards onto the pile of credits in the center of the table. A perfect idiot's array. The Vaughn slammed his four fists down in disgust, rattling the glasses. The Cathar hissed a curse in its native tongue, a sound like sand scraping on glass. Jax raked in the pile of metallic chips with a practiced ease, the clinking sound a melody he never tired of. "Pleasure doing business with you." He was charming, everyone said so. It was a carefully constructed veneer, a shield as vital as the deflector screens on his ship. It hid the dangerous edge, the cold calculation that kept him alive when charm wasn't enough. His ship, the Kestrel. A pang of something sharp and unpleasant cut through his victory buzz. His ship, his only real friend in the cosmos, was currently sitting in impound dock C-12, held hostage by a mountain of docking fees and a particularly stubborn Port Authority droid. This win was a drop in the bucket, but a drop was better than nothing. As he was stacking his newly acquired wealth, a shadow fell over the table. Jax didn't look up immediately. In a place like this, sudden shadows were rarely good news. He finished his stack, his senses on high alert, his hand casually resting near the blaster holstered on his thigh. "Jax, I presume." The voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly out of place in the grimy cantina. It was the kind of voice that was used to giving orders and being obeyed. Jax finally looked up. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a tailored suit of charcoal gray that probably cost more than the Kestrel's last 3 repair bills combined. His face was a mask of polite indifference, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. A corporate man, no doubt. "Depends who's asking," Jax replied, his grin tightening slightly. "My name is Silas," the man said, ignoring the implicit warning. "I represent a concerned party with a vested interest in reclaiming some lost property. I'm told you're the best pilot on this side of the Outer Rim. More specifically, I'm told you're reckless enough to take on jobs no one else will touch." Jax leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Flattery will get you everywhere. What's the job?" Soft tone. Silas slid into the seat, vacated by the disgruntled Vaughn. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We need you to retrieve a research probe. It went down on a planet called Xylos." The name hung in the air like a bad omen. Xylos. Even in the lawless Outer Rim, some places had a reputation. Xylos wasn't just off limits. It was a ghost story pilots told to scare rookies. A graveyard of ships. "Xylos is a myth," Jax said, his voice flat, and a deadly one. "No one goes to Xylos." "Which is precisely why the pay is substantial," Silas countered, his lips curving into a faint, knowing smile. "Enough to get your beloved Kestrel out of impound, with enough left over to disappear for a very long time." Jax's eyes narrowed. The corporate stooge had done his homework. The mention of the Kestrel was a calculated strike, and it hit its mark. He hated being predictable. "I'm listening," he said. The private hangar was a world away from the cantina. The air was clean, filtered, and sterile. Gleaming corporate shuttles sat in neat rows, a stark contrast to the dented, grease-stained freighters Jax was used to. Silas led him to a briefing room, overlooking the hangar floor. A holographic map of the sector glowed in the center of the room. "Soft tone," Silas said, gesturing to a swirling, angry red dot on the map. "Classified as uninhabitable. The reason is this." He manipulated the hologram, and the view zoomed in. The planet was completely encased in a roiling mass of clouds, a perpetual storm system of unimaginable violence. Lightning, visible even from the simulation, arced between the clouds in constant frenzied bursts. "The Xylos anomaly," Silas explained. "A permanent, sector-wide gravimetric and atmospheric disturbance. It generates winds exceeding 1,000 kilometers per hour and an electromagnetic field that fries the systems of any ship that gets too close. We've sent a dozen ships, military grade. They were all torn apart before they even reached the upper atmosphere. And you lost a toy in this blender, Jax said, circling the hologram, his pilot's eye assessing the storm's patterns. What's so important about this probe? It contains proprietary research data. Exceedingly valuable, Silas said, a little too quickly. Its recovery is a top priority. Jax wasn't buying it. Corporations didn't risk this much for research data, but he didn't care about Silas's real motives. He cared about the challenge. His fingers twitched, itching for the controls of his ship. Flying through that was the kind of thing they'd sing songs about, if he survived. You said you sent military-grade ships, Jax noted. They fly by the book, they're predictable, the storm isn't. Our analysis agrees, Silas conceded. We need a different approach. A pilot who flies on instinct, not procedure. We need you, Jax. Jax stopped circling and faced the corporate man. The thrill-seeker in him was already screaming yes, but the scoundrel knew an opportunity when he saw one. All right, Silas, I'll take your job, but my price just went up. Double the initial offer. Half now, half on delivery of your toy. Soffitz's eyebrow twitched, the first crack in his composed facade. That's exorbitant. It's the price of doing business with the best. Jax shot back. And one more thing. I want a clean slate. My record. All those little indiscretions you so kindly researched. They get wiped from every corporate and guild database in the sector. I walk away from this a free man. Soft tone. Silas stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching. Jax met his gaze without flinching. He knew desperation when he saw it, and whatever was on that probe, Silas's bosses wanted it back badly. Done, Silas finally said, extending a hand. Get us our probe, Jax, and you'll have everything you want. Jax ignored the hand. Just have the credits and the pardon ready. I'll get your probe. The Kestrel groaned as it bucked against the outer edge of the storm. Red lights flashed across the cockpit, and the wail of the proximity alarm was a constant, nerve-shredding scream. Jax was strapped into the pilot's seat, his hands dancing over the controls, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. This was it. This was what it felt like to be alive. Come on, baby. Hold together, he murmured, his voice a low thrum that was lost in the roar of the ship's straining engines and the howl of the wind outside. He pushed the throttle forward, plunging the Kestrel headfirst into the maelstrom. The ship, a heavily modified light freighter, was tough and responsive, an extension of his own will, but this was like trying to fly through a solid wall. The view screen was a blind chaos of swirling gas and plasma discharges. He was flying blind, relying solely on his instruments and the seat-of-your-pants instincts that had saved his skin more times than he could count. A sudden violent lurch threw him against his restraints. The ship spun, and a sickening screech of metal on metal echoed through the hull. Shields at 40%. The ship's computer blared, its synthesized voice unnervingly calm. I see that, Jax yelled back, fighting the controls. He rerouted auxiliary power to the forward deflectors, his knuckles white. He could feel the storm trying to rip his ship apart, a malevolent, living entity. He saw a gap in the energy readings, a momentary lull in the chaos. It was insane, a path that would take him dangerously close to a massive gravimetric shear, but it was his only shot. He banked hard, the G-force pressing him deep into his seat. The Kestrel shuddered violently, the hull plating groaning in agony. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought he'd made a fatal mistake. The entire ship flickered, lights dying, and then flaring back to life. And then, silence. The alarms cut out. The violent shaking stopped. Jax blinked, his ears ringing. He looked at the view screen, and his breath caught in his throat. He was through. Below him, bathed in the soft golden light of a sun he couldn't see, lay Xylos. It was beautiful, a world of lush emerald green jungles, sapphire blue oceans, and continents that swirled with impossible colors. The angry, chaotic storm still raged above, a ceiling of fire and fury. But down here, there was a profound and absolute calm. Well, I'll be damned, he breathed. a slow grin spreading across his face. He had done it. He had tamed the beast. As he began his descent, a new alert pinged on his console. It wasn't from the probe. The transponder he was tracking was still miles away. This was something else, a powerful, focused energy signature, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat. It was deep within the largest jungle continent, a silent, beckoning mystery. Curiosity, the trait that got him into more trouble than any other, took hold. He adjusted his course. The probe could wait. The Kestrel touched down in a clearing of soft, moss-like vegetation, its landing struts sinking slightly into the damp ground. The air that filtered into the cockpit was thick with the scent of alien rain and blooming flora. Jax powered down the main systems, the sudden quiet of the ship amplifying the strange, chittering sounds of the jungle outside. He grabbed a pulse rifle, slung a gear pack over his shoulder, and headed for the ramp. The jungle was a riot of life. Towering trees with bioluminescent fungi clinging to their bark soared towards the storm ceiling. Strange, multi-limbed creatures scurried through the undergrowth, and the air hummed with the beat of unseen wings. It was beautiful, but it was the silence that was most unnerving. Not a lack of sound, but a lack of any familiar rhythm. It was the silence of a place that had never known the clang of machinery or the stomp of a civilized foot. He followed the energy signature on his handheld scanner, pushing through giant fern-like plants that dripped with iridescent dew. After an hour of trekking, he saw it. The trees parted, and he stepped into a vast, open space. Before him, stretching as far as the eye could see, was a city, but it was like no city he had ever imagined. It was carved, or perhaps grown, from a single, continuous crystalline material that shimmered with an internal, pearlescent light. Towers spiraled into the sky, their forms both elegant and impossibly complex. Bridges of woven light connected structures that defied gravity. There were no doors, no windows, no streets. It was a silent, breathtaking monument to a forgotten age, and it was utterly empty. He walked through the crystalline canyons, his footsteps echoing in the profound stillness. The air itself seemed to thrum with the energy he had detected from orbit. It was a place of immense power, but it was a sleeping power. At the heart of the city, in a wide plaza where the light seemed to pool, he found the probe. It was half buried in the crystalline ground, as if the plaza itself had tried to swallow it. But it was the probe's surface that made him stop dead. It was no longer the dull gray of a corporate machine. Its casing was now covered in a network of intricate, glowing glyphs, the same pearlescent color as the city. They pulsed in time with the energy signature, a slow, steady heartbeat. The probe hadn't just crashed here. It had been changed, integrated. Jax cautiously approached the object, his rifle held at the ready. This job had just gone from dangerous to deeply, profoundly weird. As his hand reached out to touch the strange glyphs, a movement in his peripheral vision made him freeze. He wasn't alone. Soft tone. From the shimmering walls of the surrounding buildings, figures began to emerge. They didn't walk out of doorways. They seemed to coalesce from the light itself, stepping out of the crystal as if it were water. They were tall and impossibly slender, their forms vaguely humanoid but elongated, graceful. Their bodies were made of the same translucent, light-filled material as the city, and they moved with a silent, flowing grace. They had no discernible faces, just smooth, featureless heads that tilted with an inquisitive air. The Xylans. They formed a silent circle around him, their presence not immediately threatening, but overwhelmingly powerful. Jax's heart hammered in his chest. He tightened his grip on his rifle, but he knew it would be useless. He was a trespasser here, a loud, clumsy intruder in a world of silent, crystalline grace, and he had the sinking feeling that he had just stumbled into a secret the galaxy was not meant to know. One of the beings glided closer. It raised a long, slender hand, and Jax flinched, bracing for an attack. But there was no pain. Instead, his mind flooded with images, feelings, and a wave of pure, undiluted communication that was more profound than any spoken word. He saw the city, not as it was now, but as it had been for millennia, a vibrant, thriving hub of a peaceful civilization, living in perfect harmony with their world. He felt their deep, resonant connection to the planet, a symbiotic relationship that transcended simple existence. He saw the stars, not as points of light to be conquered, but as a silent cosmic dance of which they were a small part. Then, he saw the probe. He saw it tearing through their sky, a screaming, violent intrusion. He felt their shock, their pain. The probe's technology was a discordant shriek in their silent telepathic world. It was a poison. The final image was of them surrounding the probe, not in anger, but in a kind of gentle pity. They had reached out with their collective consciousness, not to destroy it, but to soothe it, to calm its chaotic energies and integrate it into their network, turning its shriek into a hum. They had healed it. The vision faded, leaving Jax breathless and disoriented. He looked from the silent ethereal beings to the glowing probe and back again. Silas hadn't just lied about the value of the research data. He had lied about everything. Jax lowered his rifle. The gesture felt inadequate, but it was all he could offer. The Xylan who had shown him the vision remained before him, its featureless face tilted. In his mind a name formed, a label for this specific consciousness that had reached out to his own, Alara. There was a sense of curiosity from her, a feeling of openness that was entirely alien to his own cynical, guarded nature. For the first time in a long time, Jax didn't have a witty comeback or a clever plan. He just felt small, a cog in a machine much larger and more terrible than he had ever imagined. He gestured to the probe. "You did this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The answer came not in images this time, but in a wave of pure comprehension that washed over him. It was loud. We made it quiet. The simplicity of it was staggering. They weren't scientists or engineers in any way he understood. They were gardeners of energy, of consciousness. He spent the next cycle, he couldn't measure it in hours or days, with them. Alara was his guide. She led him through the crystalline city, showing him things that rewired his brain. He saw them commune with the planet's flora, encouraging plants to grow into shelters or produce fruits of pure energy. He saw them manipulate light, weaving it into solid, intricate patterns. It wasn't technology, it was existence. It was a state of being so advanced it looped all the way back around to looking like magic. He found himself talking to her, telling her about his life, about the kestrel, about the grubby cantinas and the thrill of a dangerous run. It was strange confessing his selfish, chaotic life to a being of pure light, but he felt no judgment from her, only a serene, unwavering curiosity. He was a novelty, a discordant but interesting note in their grand symphony, and to his own profound surprise, he was starting to like the music. It was Alara who finally showed him the truth. She led him back to the altered probe and let him touch it again. This time, the vision was different. It wasn't from their perspective, but from the probe's. He saw its core programming, the missions Satrians had never mentioned. The proprietary research data was a lie. The probe was a terraforming device, the first stage of a planetary overhaul. Its purpose was to analyze the atmosphere and begin releasing a cascade of nanites that would systematically break down the existing ecosystem and rebuild it into one suitable for human colonization. It was genocide, packaged in a corporate shell. The Xylan's healing of the probe hadn't just quieted it. It had stopped the terraforming process before it could begin. A cold fury, colder than the vacuum of space, settled in Jax's gut. He had been a pawn, the unwitting scout for a planetary execution. He stumbled back from the probe, the beautiful glyphs now looking like a scar on a weapon of mass destruction. "I have to stop them," he said, looking at Alara. A feeling of sorrow, deep and ancient, flowed from her. "They will not be stopped. Your people are loud. They do not listen to the quiet. Then I'll make them listen," Jax vowed, a reckless fire in his eyes. He turned and sprinted back towards the jungle, towards the kestrel. He had to contact Silas, call off the deal, warn him away. He didn't know what he'd say, but he had to do something. He was halfway to his ship when a shadow passed overhead. He looked up. High above, piercing the golden haze of the calm atmosphere, a ship had emerged from the storm. It was a corporate cruiser, sleek and predatory. Then another, and another. A fleet. Soft Tone waited for his signal. The probe was never the prize, it was the beacon. His common unit, silent for days, crackled to life. "A magnificent view, isn't it, Jax?" Silas's voice was as smooth and smug as ever. "I trust you've made contact with the locals." Jax stood frozen in the alien jungle, the pulse rifle feeling like a useless toy in his hands. "Silas, you son of a bitch. It's a civilization. You can't do this." "Oh, I can. And I will." Silas replied coolly. This world, its energy potential, it's worth more than 1,000 fledgling civilizations. Now here is how this is going to proceed. Those beings have defenses, some kind of energy field that's interfering with our targeting systems. You are going to go back into that city and disable it for us. Do that, and you still get your money and your pardon. Refuse, and we will blow that rust bucket of yours into atoms and leave you to be exterminated with the rest of the glowing ghosts. The ultimatum hung in the air, a death sentence for him or for the Xylans. The old Jax, the one who had walked into that cantina, would have taken the deal in a heartbeat. Save his ship, save his skin, that was the code. But as he looked back in the direction of the silent city, he saw Elara's form, a faint shimmer of light at the edge of the jungle. He felt her sorrow, her resignation, and something inside him broke. Go to hell, Silas, Jax snarled into the comm. Wrong answer, Silas said, and the line went dead. A moment later, the ground shook. A brilliant orange explosion blossomed in the distance. Right where he'd left the kestrel, the shockwave tore through the jungle, ripping ancient trees from their roots and sending Jax flying. He landed hard, his head slamming against the ground, and the world went black. He awoke to a gentle, pulsing light against his eyelids. He was back in the city, his head resting on something soft that felt like woven moss. Elara was there, and other Xylans. A feeling of gratitude and concern washed over him. They had saved him, but the image of the kestrel's destruction burned in his mind. His ship, his home, everything he had, gone. A new feeling rose through the grief. Rage, pure, undiluted, and absolute. Silas had taken everything. Now, he had nothing left to lose. They are coming, Elara projected, her thoughts laced with a fear he hadn't felt from her before. They will unmake our home. Jax pushed himself to his feet, his body aching. No, they won't, he said, his voice a low growl. He looked around at the crystalline canyons, at the impossible architecture. You said my tech was loud. Let's see how they like the noise. He didn't have a ship, but he had a plan. A desperate, insane, probably suicidal plan. It was a kestrel's gambit. He had Elara guide him to the city's central spire, the nexus of its power. He explained his idea, a jumble of technical jargon and tactical desperation, and the Xylans, with their intuitive grasp of energy, understood immediately. They began to work, their silent grace a stark contrast to the violent chaos of Jax's plan. They were redirecting the city's energy, focusing it, turning their entire home into a weapon. Meanwhile, Jax was running, his pulse rifle in hand. He was the bait. He led the corporate assault drones on a merry chase through the crystalline labyrinth. Using his knowledge of the layout from Elara's tour, he was a scoundrel, a smuggler. He knew how to hide, how to fight dirty. He ducked and weaved through the glowing archways, firing potshots at the drones, drawing them deeper and deeper into the city's heart. Above, the battle raged. The corporate fleet, confident in their superiority, had moved into low orbit. They began their bombardment. But instead of hitting a defenseless city, their energy beams struck a newly formed, impossibly strong shield that shimmered over the crystalline spires. The Xylans were fighting back. Jax reached the central plaza, the drones hot on his tail. Now, he screamed, though he knew they couldn't hear his voice. The city answered. The glyphs on the ground, the very same ones that covered the probe, flared to life. The energy the Xylans had been gathering was unleashed. It didn't explode, it resonated. A wave of pure, focused energy, tuned to the specific frequency of the corporate ship's power cores, shot into the sky. On the bridge of his cruiser, Silas watched in horror as his fleet died. Consoles exploded, engines overloaded. One by one, his ships went dark, their systems fried by an energy wave they couldn't possibly defend against. It was a silent, elegant execution, but it came at a cost. The energy required for the pulse was immense. On the ground, the city flickered. The brilliant internal light of the towers dimmed, and cracks began to appear in the crystalline structures. The Xylans themselves seemed to fade, their forms growing less distinct. In the plaza, the drones, now cut off from their fleet's command, defaulted to their last order: eliminate the target. They opened fire on Jax. He dove for cover, but he was out in the open. A searing pain shot through his leg. He was hit. As a drone leveled its cannon for the killing blow, a form of pure, brilliant light threw itself in front of Jax, Alara. She took the full force of the blast. Her form flared, impossibly bright for a single heart-stopping moment, and then she collapsed, her light fading rapidly. Jax crawled to her side, ignoring the pain in his leg. He reached out, his hand hovering over her dimming form. He felt her consciousness, faint and fractured. "It is quiet now," she projected, the thought weak, laced with a final, profound peace. "Thank you." "No," Jax choked out, tears blurring his vision. "I'm sorry." She raised a single fading hand and touched the back of his. A searing heat, followed by an intense cold, shot up his arm. He cried out, pulling his hand back. There, burned into his skin as if by a brand, was a single glowing Zillan glyph. It pulsed with a soft internal light, a perfect miniature replica of the ones that had saved the city. A part of the song, Alara's last thought whispered through his mind. "So you will not forget the quiet." And then, her light went out. She was gone. The remaining corporate ships, crippled and leaderless, limped back towards the storm, retreating from the ghost planet that had broken them. Jax, his leg bleeding, his heart shattered, stumbled back through the wounded city. The light was dimmer now, the silence heavier. He was a hero to a people he could never truly know, a savior who had brought them victory and ruin in equal measure. He found the Kestrel. The explosion had been a bluff. Silas had targeted a spot 50 meters from the ship, a warning shot. His ship was damaged, scarred, but it was intact. He spent a full cycle making repairs, his movements mechanical, his mind a hollow shell. The glyph on his hand never stopped glowing. Finally, he was ready. He limped into the cockpit and powered up the engines. He didn't look back at the silent crystalline city. The pain was too great. He piloted the Kestrel up, away from the surface of Xylos, and pointed its nose at the swirling, angry storm. He pushed the throttle forward, plunging back into the chaos he knew so well. But he was not the same man who had flown in. The cocky grin was gone, replaced by a grim, haunted look. He had his ship, he had his freedom, but he had paid for it with a piece of his soul. As the Kestrel broke through the last vestiges of the storm and into the black, star-dusted expanse of the galaxy, Jax looked down at his hand. The glyph glowed with a soft, persistent light, a gift, a burden, a promise, a mystery he would carry with him into the unknown. A solitary ship flying against the vast, indifferent dark, forever changed by the memory of a silent song.